If you ask my family to describe me, they'll probably say something like, "Oh, that's just Wes. He works with his hands. Quiet type. Real steady." Which is code for, "We don't really know what he does, and we've never asked." I'm 29, live in a small house with a rusty mailbox, own 2 flannel shirts in rotation, and have a dog that snores louder than the neighbor's Harley. My job? Not glamorous. Not flashy. But it pays the bills. Sometimes twice over. Because contrary to what my uncle said at Thanksgiving, I don't live paycheck to paycheck. Not anymore. But let's rewind a bit. Thanksgiving at the Jacobs household is like a reality TV show you can't escape. Picture a dozen overcooked side dishes, 1 dry turkey, 6 passive-aggressive comments per hour, and someone always managing to bring up crypto at the wrong time. This year, I almost didn't go. Work had been brutal. We were finishing a commercial build, and my crew had pulled 2 14-hour shifts in a row. I showed up to dinner still wearing my boots, a hoodie stained with caulk, and that unmistakable, "I just want mashed potatoes and silence" face. And yet, the moment I stepped through the door, I knew what was coming. "Wes!" My Uncle Doug boomed across the kitchen, like he was announcing a wrestling match. "Still living paycheck to paycheck?" Just loud enough that everyone turned. My cousin snorted into his wine. My aunt pretended she didn't hear. My mom winced. My dad patted me on the back like that would somehow absorb the insult. I didn't answer. I just gave a tight-lipped smile, nodded at the turkey, and sat down next to Grandma, who whispered, "He peaked in '89. Don't take it personally." Doug was the kind of guy who wore cologne you could smell from the driveway. He'd once posted a photo holding a cigar with the caption, "Rise and grind briefcase flex biceps," even though he hadn't worked in 5 years. His whole personality was built around being in finance, which, in his case, meant running a once profitable loan company that now lived off refinancing fees and vibes. At dinner, he launched into one of his usual spiels about passive income, short-term gains, and not putting all your eggs in a blue-collar basket. I spooned stuffing like it was a competitive sport, and said nothing. Because years ago, I learned the golden rule of being underestimated. Let them assume you're broke because your hands have calluses. Let them think you're unambitious because you wear the same boots every day. Let them talk, and keep building in silence. What Uncle Doug didn't know. While he was laughing at his own joke, I was weeks away from finalizing paperwork on a multi-unit property. The same bank he used. The same one I'd been quietly working with for almost a year, ever since I partnered with a friend who specialized in distressed real estate. I put up half the capital, learned the numbers inside out, and spent my nights reading contracts instead of watching Netflix. No one in my family knew. Because I stopped explaining myself after the 3rd time someone said, "That's cute, Wes. But when are you getting a real job?" The house smelled like burnt yams and tension. My little cousin spilled cranberry sauce on the floor. Someone turned on the football game. And there was Uncle Doug, sipping bourbon, talking about his connections at the country club. I excused myself after dessert. "Work in the morning," I said. Doug laughed. "Must be nice to have a schedule someone else makes for you." I just nodded. And left. What I didn't say. That I make the schedule now. That I own the van. The crew. The LLC. That I'm the one signing checks and choosing contracts. Because you don't need to correct people who are busy writing your story, you just have to publish the ending before they do. And Doug's ending? It was already in motion. The bank merger was going through. And the name on the contract for his office lease renewal? Well, that's where things get fun. Doug didn't know it yet, but the bank he used for all his commercial property leases had been in talks to offload part of their portfolio. Old loans, neglected accounts, dead weight. Basically, guys like him. And I'd been sitting across the table from their regional rep every other Tuesday for 3 months straight. Not in a fancy office. Not in a suit. At a diner, over lukewarm coffee and a stack of contracts, with my work boots still laced and drywall dust in my beard. I had a simple pitch. You've got buildings no one wants. I've got capital, a maintenance crew, and zero ego about getting my hands dirty. They listened. See, most of my jobs came from word of mouth. Fix this, install that. But 2 years ago, I realized something. I was fixing other people's properties for $40 an hour, while they raked in rent. So, I flipped the script. Started small, duplex on the edge of town. Then a 4-unit that looked like it hadn't seen love since Bush was president. I didn't post about it, didn't brag, didn't even tell my parents. I just worked. Nights, weekends, early mornings. Half the time, I was crawling under porches with a flashlight, muttering to myself like some kind of HVAC raccoon. And now? I had just enough saved, just enough momentum, and just enough connections to take a real swing. One of the buildings on that distressed loan list? Doug's office space. Not the whole plaza, just the block he leased. But it was enough. When I saw his company name on the spreadsheet the bank rep slid across the table, I didn't react. Just underlined it and said, "Let's talk numbers." I wasn't planning revenge. I didn't even care about the paycheck to paycheck jab that much. I've heard worse. But something about the poetic timing, Doug, who made fun of people like me for working trades, about to lease from someone in boots, felt too perfect to ignore. The deal closed in mid-January. I signed the paperwork, shook the rep's hand, and walked out of that bank with the kind of smile that sneaks up on you. Not cocky. Just complete. I didn't tell anyone. Not my crew. Not my friends. Not even Sam, my neighbor who usually knew every detail of my life just by peeking over the fence with her friendly gossip face. The building needed some love, so I hired my own guys under a different name. Had them repaint, update the lighting, redo the floors in the lobby. Doug's company was the only active lease left, and his payment history was already spotty. Still, I didn't rush anything. Not until I saw him again. In February, my mom organized a birthday brunch for Grandma. The kind of forced get-together where everyone pretends they like each other for 2 hours over burnt quiche and funny stories that actually sting a little. I showed up wearing the same jacket I've had since high school. Doug showed up late, loud, and somehow more orange than usual. Spray tan? Sun? Burned ego? Who knows? You still working for that plumbing outfit? He asked, stabbing a fork at me across the table. I smiled. Something like that. He chuckled. Well, keep grinding. That's what guys like you do, huh? And that was when I knew he still had no clue. No clue that the guy he mocked over yams and stuffing now had final say over whether his lease got renewed. No clue that while he was bragging about leverage and capital, I was quietly buying the floor under his feet. It was almost disappointing. But also, kind of perfect. Because when you grow up being talked down to, you start thinking the only way to win is to shout louder. Turns out the real move? Say less. Build more. And wait for the envelope. Because it was coming. And when it landed on his desk, with my name stamped clean at the bottom, well, he was going to choke on his cigar. The envelope didn't come right away. Because I didn't want it to. I let Doug enjoy his delusion for a little longer. Let him keep ordering business cards with embossed logos and pretending his company had more than 2 actual employees, one of which was his golf buddy's kid who still didn't know how to format an invoice. Meanwhile, I was playing a quiet game of chess. 3 weeks after Grandma's birthday brunch, I called the building's management team. Technically, it was still under their operation for the next 90 days while I transitioned in. I told them, start prep for lease renewals. Don't tell tenants who the new owner is. Yet. And then I circled Doug's name. I wasn't being cruel. Honestly, if he'd been even remotely respectful, if he'd ever once treated me like more than some poor tradesman with dirt under his nails, I might have just sent over a basic lease extension with no markup. Could have been clean. Easy. But instead, I decided to send a memo. Nothing dramatic. Just a subtle little change. We updated the name of the management firm to a D Not yet. What he did notice was the rent increase. It was modest, 9%. Not outrageous. Not extortion. Just enough to make him do a double take. Enough to annoy him, not alert him. 2 days later, I got an email from the management team. Subject: tenant requesting call. Attached was a screenshot of a message from Doug. Not sure who this new management is, but I've been here 12 years. This rent bump is absurd. I want to talk to the landlord directly. I forwarded it to myself and smiled. He still had no idea. Still thought there was some cigar-puffing property baron behind it all. Still believed he had leverage because he'd been here 12 years. Doug's the type of guy who thinks tenure means power. Like the longer you exist somewhere, the more entitled you are to take up space. He didn't know he was dealing with someone who used to unclog sewer lines at 2 a.m. and still showed up on time the next day. I drafted a response, signed it under the firm name, and sent it back through the management team. Thank you for your feedback. The ownership group has reviewed your lease history and market rates. The renewal terms are firm. We appreciate your continued tenancy. That was it. Professional. Polite. Deadpan. And just like that, I became the ownership group. Wes Bryant, in third person. Weeks passed. Doug complained a bit, but ultimately paid the new rate. Business as usual. Until the letter arrived. It was mid-April. I remember because I had just finished a job rewiring an old craftsman house, and my hands still smelled like sawdust and sweat when the management office CC'd me. Doug had been sent the official lease transfer packet. Inside was the standard information. New leaseholder details. Updated routing info for payments. A formal greeting from the new owner. My name. Not the firm. Not the holding company. Me. Wes Bryant. Clear as day. Signed at the bottom in black ink. I didn't see his reaction, obviously. But I felt it. Like a storm cloud rolling across the group chat, silent, but thick with static. For 2 days, my phone stayed quiet. Then my mom texted. Did you buy Doug's office building? Just like that. No punctuation. No emojis. Like she wasn't sure whether to be impressed or horrified. I replied. Not the whole building. Just his square footage. She didn't respond. Doug didn't either. For a while. But I knew something was coming. Because men like him, they don't go silent for long. Especially not when their fragile little power bubble pops. The silence didn't last forever. It broke, as expected, through family. Not a call. Not even a text. It was Aunt Karen, of all people, the woman who once asked me if I could look at her garbage disposal during my own father's funeral. She called while I was elbow-deep in drywall repair. Wesley, she said in that chirpy voice she reserves for pretending nothing's wrong. Doug told me what happened. He's very surprised. Is that what we're calling it? I said, brushing white dust off my pants. Well, it just seems odd that you wouldn't say anything. I mean, family's family. If you were going to make a purchase like that. I used my money. I cut in. For my business. I didn't realize that required a committee vote. She huffed. Doug's just feeling a little displaced. You know he's proud. He's built that company from the ground up. I wanted to say, you mean the company that hasn't turned a profit since Obama was in office? But I didn't. Instead, I said, he's welcome to keep leasing. I've made no changes to his terms. Well, technically you increased the rent. I adjusted to market rate. He's still paying under what the salon next door pays, and they don't smoke cigars in the hallway. There was a pause. You know, Wes, she said gently, it wouldn't kill you to be gracious. You've clearly done well. No need to rub it in. Gracious. That word stuck with me. Gracious. Like I was supposed to apologize for succeeding. Like I was supposed to keep playing the broke nephew role just so Uncle Doug could feel bigger at Thanksgiving. But here's the thing, I had been gracious. Every time I bit my tongue when Doug called my work grunt stuff. Every holiday dinner I endured in silence while he gave my younger cousin a lecture about real careers, right in front of me. Every group photo where I got cropped out because I didn't fit the aesthetic. I'd swallowed it all. Until I didn't. Later that evening, I got a message. From Doug. No. Hi. No. Hope you're well. Just one line. Let's talk. That was it. No punctuation. The digital version of slamming a file on someone's desk. I waited a day. Then replied. You can contact the management team. I don't handle tenant concerns directly. That one hit. I knew it did. Because 10 minutes later he called. I let it ring. Then again. And again. 5 times in 1 hour. Eventually I picked up. Wes, he said, voice tight. You think this is funny? I sat back in my chair, staring at the invoice I was reviewing. No, Doug. I think this is real estate. You blindsided me. I didn't know I needed your permission to invest. He laughed, bitter sharp. This whole thing is about Thanksgiving, isn't it? That stupid paycheck-to-paycheck joke. That was just dessert, I said. You've been serving appetizers for years. Silence. Then, you can't keep this going. You're not a landlord. You're a construction guy. This isn't your world. I didn't yell. Didn't get defensive. I just said, maybe it wasn't. But it is now. Click. I hung up. Felt my pulse slow, like my body had been bracing for a fight that never came. Not really. It wasn't about revenge. Not at this point. It was about identity. Because for years, I'd let their version of me shape my own, like I needed a promotion or a polished title to be worthy of their respect. But now I had something better than approval. I had control. And when you've built something from the ground up, when you've bled into the foundation with your own 2 hands, you don't owe anyone an apology for owning the keys. The thing about Doug? He's not the kind of guy who loses quietly. Which is unfortunate, considering how much he's lost over the years: money, clients, respect, hairline. So, when the talk didn't go the way he wanted, he went to plan B. Petty. I found out when a friend of mine, Jamie, who runs the print shop down the street from Doug's office, texted me a photo. Doug. Standing at the front counter. Ranting. He was saying something about a hostile lease and legal action. Jamie wrote. Then he tried to order business cards that said President and Chairman. I think he's spiraling. It was almost impressive, how fast a man could go from country club king to cranky conspiracy theorist in a button-down shirt. He didn't stop there. He called my mom. Told her I was being vindictive. Told her he was just trying to teach me tough love. All those years, and now I was using business to humiliate him. To her credit, my mom didn't take the bait. She called me afterward, voice unsure. I don't want to pick sides, she said. But you're not doing this to get back at him, right? I sighed. Mom, I own 3 properties. He just happens to be inside one of them. Silence. Then, you own 3? Yep. 3. The Doug property wasn't even my biggest investment. But it was, admittedly, the most satisfying one. Because here's the truth. Doug didn't make me buy that building. He just reminded me why I stopped shrinking myself to make other people feel tall. Every time he laughed at my job, every time he made a joke about guys who work with tools, he wasn't just mocking me. He was mocking work. Real work. The kind that stains your knuckles and builds the cities he pretends to own. So no, it wasn't revenge. It was alignment. Putting my name where the value actually lived. And if Doug felt threatened by that, maybe he should have picked fewer fights with the drywall guy. The real kicker came 1 week later. My property manager forwarded me an email. Doug had submitted a request for early termination. The note was short, corporate sounding. Due to unexpected restructuring, we will be vacating the unit effective May 1st. Please advise on necessary documentation. Which, translated from Doug speak, meant, filed under his home address. Suddenly, the puffed-up Thanksgiving bully looked less like a villain, and more like a man standing on a pile of burning receipts. I called my manager. "Tear up the fee," I said. "He can leave clean." "You sure?" she asked. "You could push back a little. Let him go." Not because I pitied him, but because I didn't need to flex. The scoreboard already read loud and clear. Besides, there was something more satisfying than payback. Peace. Letting someone walk away without saying a word, because the facts already said it all. And I had more important things to focus on. Like a downtown property going up for sale next month. Bigger footprint. Better neighborhood. And guess who was quietly becoming one of the top cash buyers in the county? Hint, he wears flannel, drives a dented truck, and once got laughed at over turkey and stuffing. Doug moved out quietly. Which was a first. No party. No announcement. No farewell post about new chapters, or business expansion. Just a Tuesday afternoon, a beat-up U-Haul, and two guys hauling out dusty filing cabinets from a space that used to smell like cologne and ego. My property manager said he didn't even make eye contact. Just handed over the keys, muttered something about restructuring, and left. She told me. Restructuring. Sure. Or, as normal people call it, eviction without paperwork. I didn't celebrate. Didn't gloat. Didn't post a cryptic quote on Facebook with a sunset background and passive-aggressive undertones. I just walked through the now empty office the next day. Lights off. Carpet stained. The drywall in the back conference room still had a dent from some long-forgotten argument. Funny how fast a kingdom crumbles when it was built on appearances. I ran my fingers along the windowsill, then turned to my contractor and said, "Full gut. Clean slate." He nodded. "Modern layout?" "Modern values," I said. "Something built on actual structure this time." While they got to work, I started getting messages. From people I hadn't heard from in years. One of Doug's old clients. A cousin I barely speak to. Even a guy I hadn't seen since high school who suddenly wanted to grab coffee and pick my brain about property investment. It's funny how fast people remember you when they hear your name attached to money. But one message stood out. From my dad. Now, for context, he's never really been in my corner. Not against me, just on the fence. The be realistic kind of guy. Supportive only if you stayed within the lines. The message said, "Heard about Doug. Proud of you, Wes. You did it right." Short. But it landed harder than I expected. Because for years, I chased that sentence in different forms: report cards, promotions, finished basements I hoped he'd brag about. And now it came from a bank statement with my name at the bottom. Still, I didn't reply right away. I was processing more than just a win. I was feeling the weight of how much time I'd spent trying to earn what I already deserved, basic respect. And now that I had it, it felt quiet. Not empty. Just different. Like walking into a house you built from scratch and realizing no one else gets to tell you where to put the furniture anymore. A week after Doug's move out, I ran into him. Completely unplanned. Grocery store. Frozen food aisle. He was holding a box of off-brand chicken nuggets, and wearing the same wrinkled dress shirt I'd seen him in last Thanksgiving. We made eye contact. Brief. Sharp. He nodded first. "Wes." "Doug?" Silence stretched between us like a weird game of chicken. Then he said, "I've been thinking about starting something new." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? Consulting, maybe. Smaller scale. Clean slate." I nodded slowly. "Well," I said, "clean slates can be good. If you actually build something on them this time." His mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not quite anger. Just restraint. He looked like a man holding back 10 years of bitterness, and realizing none of it paid rent anymore. Then he said something I didn't expect. "You didn't have to be quiet about it." I tilted my head. "Would it have mattered?" Another pause. Then he shook his head. "No," he admitted. You were right not to be. And with that, he turned and walked away, box of nuggets in hand, pride a little thinner than before. I watched him go, then grabbed my own cart and headed for the checkout. No fanfare. No dramatic final word. Just a quiet confirmation that the scoreboard didn't need flashing lights. It just needed clarity. And I had it. Now all that remained. It was the next Thanksgiving. Because something told me? Doug was still going to show up. But this time, the table looked a little different. Thanksgiving came again like clockwork, same text from Mom, same. Bring whatever you want. Message that always meant bring everything and don't expect help. At first, I ignored it. I wasn't in the mood for another holiday where people pretended not to know what I did for a living. Where, they asked? Still working with pipes? While sipping wine they didn't pay for and gossiping about people who couldn't defend themselves. But then Grandma called. She didn't ask what I was bringing. She just said, "You coming, sweetheart? It's not the same without your laugh in this house." That got me. Because no matter how sideways the rest of the family turned, Grandma always stayed facing me. So I went. I pulled up in my matte gray truck, now with Bryant Property Group etched clean on the side. No music playing. No fanfare. Just a man with mashed potatoes in the passenger seat and his name on 3 property deeds in the glove box. The driveway had been repaved last month. I paid for it. What nobody knew, not even Doug, was that the house didn't belong to our family anymore. It belonged to me. Grandma had sold it to me quietly in August. Said she wanted to simplify things and make sure it didn't end up in the wrong hands. I told her I'd take care of it. She just smiled and said, "You already do." So yeah, I didn't knock. I used my key. Walked in with a calm face and a slow breath, and looked around like I was seeing it for the first time, not the kid who used to get stuck at the folding table with off-brand soda and a paper plate. "Wes is here," my mom said, surprised. "Didn't think you'd come," my cousin added. Doug didn't say anything. Just looked up from his phone with the same expression he probably gives in voices, annoyed but obligated. I placed the food on the counter, gave Grandma a kiss, and sat down without waiting for someone to point me to the extra chair. The meal went on like usual. Dry turkey. Forced laughs. At least one joke from my uncle about how you can't even say Thanksgiving anymore without offending someone. But the air felt different this year. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't shrinking in my seat or scanning the room for approval. I just was. Until dessert hit. That's when it started. My cousin, the one who used to roll his eyes when I talked about fixing up properties, said, "Hey, I saw a new Bryant Property sign near the industrial park. Any relation?" I kept eating. "Doug, though?" Doug stiffened. He looked at me like someone who'd just realized the name on the lease they'd signed last year had a face attached to it, and it was sitting across the table, passing whipped cream. "That's Wes," he said, quieter than I'd ever heard him. The table paused. "You own that building?" my mom asked, blinking. "Which one?" I replied. Doug exhaled. "All of them." It wasn't a confession. It was a surrender. Silence followed. The kind of silence you don't fill with words, the kind that says everything without needing subtitles. I didn't gloat. Didn't make a speech or flash keys or drop some mic-worthy line. I just nodded. "Some of them." "Yeah." My cousin blinked. "How many?" "3. Maybe 4 soon." My mom looked at me like she'd never actually seen me before. My dad cleared his throat, the kind of noise a man makes when pride and regret fight for the same breath. Even Grandma smiled, gave my hand a gentle squeeze under the table, and whispered, "Told you they'd see it someday." I glanced at Doug. He didn't look angry. He looked lost. Like a man who'd built his identity on belittling others, and just realized the foundation cracked when no one was looking. The best part? No one laughed. Not at me. Not this time. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the outsider. I felt like the gravity in the room had shifted. Not because I demanded it. Then at the truck, with Bryant Property Group written clean across the side. Then finally at me. You bought her house? He asked. His voice didn't have bite anymore. Just where? I nodded. She wanted out? I offered a fair price. Doug let out a weak laugh. Not bitter. Just tired. You really did it, he said. All of it. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. But then he added, I thought you'd hold it over me. Rub it in. I shook my head. I didn't buy it to humiliate you, Doug. I bought it so no one else ever could. He looked down. Kicked at the edge of the step. I guess I was wrong about you. I shrugged. You weren't wrong. You just stopped watching after the first chapter. He didn't reply. I started walking toward my truck. Just before I opened the door, I looked back. You laughed first, I said, calm as ever. But now, you're standing on the punchline. Then I got in, turned the key, and drove off. Not to prove anything. But because I could.